We're not just trying to find the people who are lost, but the lost voices, the lost stories, and the lost hope of their loved ones as well.
The two boys that were in the vehicle and their parents that helped cover up the vehicle are all guilty.
We want the families to know that people still give a damn.
I saw my father put his hands around her neck, and then he carried her out of my sight.
Our name is also our mission. We are locating the lost.
I've accepted my brother's death. I can still talk to him. We just don't see him physically. And I know I'm a believer that I'm going to see him again one day.
Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, and most podcast platforms.
And we are live. Thank you very much to everyone tuning in, and thank you to everyone who's watching this back as a recording.
Yes, thank you, everyone. So tonight we speak to Dannielle. She's a licensed drug and alcohol counselor and community outreach coordinator for Angles Behavioral Health in Augusta, Maine. Dannielle, welcome to Locating the Lost.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're doing things a little bit different tonight, guys. We don't have an actual case that we're going to be discussing. More or less, we're going to be kind of going over warning signs and things to look out for. There's a lot of people that are potentially at risk of going missing, and like we're going to touch on like human trafficking as well, and just more or less trying to give advice to people in these situations, especially if you have a loved one who might be susceptible to be in one of these situations.
Yeah. Honestly, I wasn't even sure if we were going to go live earlier, and Jeff reached out and said, hey, do we have something to talk about tonight? And I know this is something that Dannielle is actually my wife. Her and I have talked about doing this before, talking about the most vulnerable people we have in our society, the addicted, the homeless, unhoused. And Dannielle actually works with them on a daily basis. So we thought this would be a good idea to talk to Dannielle. So welcome, Dannielle. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been working in mental health since 2011, a combination of working with children and then leading into adults, which morphed into substance use counseling and support. And recently, in the last year and a half or so, I was given the task of outreach for our agency, which is a combination of helping to build relationships with other providers and entities in our communities so that as we serve the unhoused or the vulnerable populations in the area, there's more cohesive support for them. So that is what I do.
Real quick, I'll point out Kelly just posted, this is such an important topic, and I truly thank you guys for taking it on. Kelly's brother went missing and then later on was found deceased, and he was also living homeless at points. I think at the time he disappeared, he actually had been living with Kelly at the time, but that's another case. Thank you, Kelly, for joining us.
But also, I just want to comment that resonated with me when I listened to that episode. Just very familiar with the information she gave about the work he put into fixing his situation, getting housed, and heading into a place where he was more stable. And for that to have happened is tragic, and I'm sorry.
Right. And
yeah,
Bobby
unfortunately,
is her brother. Sorry.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities with the cases that we talk about with people who go missing. So hopefully this, we can give some people some tools for what to look out for, and maybe to God forbid someone's family member does go missing, maybe some advice to prep themselves before, especially if they're in one of these vulnerable situations. But it's also good advice to have in general.
Yeah. So Dannielle, why do you think, I think generally people see someone asking for money at an intersection and they probably roll their eyes at them. They're not thinking about, we're in Maine, right? And most nights it's down to 5 degrees. Some nights it's below 0 here in the wintertime. They're not thinking about these poor individuals that are asking for help, standing on the side of a corner. because they're going to go home, they're going to go to their house nice and warm.
Mhm.
Why do you think there are so many homeless people that need the help?
Well, I don't know if I can speak to the reasons because they're so big. I mean, we're talking like macro reasons like economics, and then micro reasons like trauma and addiction and mental illness. I think that a lot more individuals are turning to methods of panhandling, or what I heard yesterday, which was fly a sign, are turning to those methods to fill in gaps where their Social Security doesn't pay for certain things. I've served individuals that will panhandle to get money for a taxi to get up to a treatment provider, or they will panhandle to get money for an ID so that they can complete the application for a job or an apartment, because in order to apply for these things, you have to have IDs, birth certificates, Social Security cards, and those cost money. Transportation to get to these places to get these things cost money. And so it's a spectrum of reasons why an individual panhandles. Feed themselves, yes, feed an addiction, or pay a bill to keep a phone on, get the item that they need to continue working with their case manager. You've got resources that might turn an individual down, so there's desperation that leads to the panhandling.
Yeah. I was going to say something, and then I was reading Kara's post, so I'll post that up here. So Kara says, we actually located my friend's brother, who was homeless and missing in California for 2 years, while doing a podcast on him on Locating Lost. Yeah, that was a unique experience. First time that's ever happened. We found someone live on the air, so it's really pretty cool.
Still, that response was hilarious.
Yes, and even that, I know, I've got a cat. I remember that. And if I may, that really spoke to me as well, that there are many individuals I come across that are from out of state, or haven't spoken to their family because they don't have a phone, or some have conflicts with family that in the grand scheme of things are minute, but they're holding on to resentment or shame that's preventing them from reaching out, and they're living their life alive and well. I spoke to a gentleman tonight who wants to get back to South Carolina and doesn't have resources to do so. We'll do what we can, but it makes me wonder what family down there hasn't spoken to him and doesn't know that he's up here and still healthy, but not doing very well because he's unhoused. So there are definitely circumstances where family is searching for their loved one who is not deceased and can be found, but the resources or capabilities to do it are impossible. It makes it impossible to find them. It's needle in a haystack.
And Kara brings up another good point, or they don't realize that their family or people are even looking for them.
Exactly.
Which is what happened in that situation.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, hi, Mom. Haven't talked to his mother for 2 years, and there she is. Yeah. So I'm probably on at least 50 missing people pages on Facebook, and constantly in those pages they're posting, I haven't seen my brother in 2 years, and last I knew he was living homeless in Portland, or he was living homeless here, or she was living homeless there. So when someone checks into, because I'm just curious about this for myself, but when they check into a shelter of some sort, is it just a written record, or is it an actual electronic record now that they sign in with a name and their information?
The resources that I work with do not work with electronic records. Because those resources are not under regulations to track information. They're not providing a treatment. They're not, getting reimbursed for a service. It's you got the Link Club in Augusta, the Warming Center, Bread of Life. Those are all nonprofit supports that are helping. They do track, obviously, numbers to maintain ability to serve that community, but there's no electronic health record. And if there's a sign-in, that's for them to track the need, not necessarily share that information with an individual. I myself I try to get releases of information just to be able to even call and say, hey, so-and-so there. And then that way I can reach them.
I was just thinking and you're right, because they're not providing any treatment, but like at a hospital, there's a national database that if you look for somebody, you can see if they checked into a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I almost feel like we should do that with the homeless shelters as well.
And it very well could be like, because where I don't work in a homeless shelter and I don't know the ins and outs of that, there might be a system. I know most likely, because that's different too. If I think of Bread of Life, like their shelter is like a person has a bed and they can, be there and get supports in a different way than like an overnight shelter or a low barrier shelter. So they might have a little more information. But then again, I'm not even clear on, because I've never looked at it through the lens of like, I'm trying to find my family member. I've looked at it through the lens of a provider that has to operate in confidentiality. So I don't know what that looks like to surrender any information to a loved one that might reach out and ask.
Right.
So I do know though that
the people going through those areas might be hit or miss too, right? Like they might be there sometimes, they might, it might be kind of hard to track for those sort of people, right? So
absolutely. I know individuals that have come from Western Maine and somehow found their way into Augusta and into the shelters, and they disappear as quickly as they do appear, and they're off doing other things. One particular one left abruptly after I tried to support them in getting connected to services, and probably like 2 or 3 weeks after I met with them, I saw them hanging out in Mill Park, and they're just transient because they're either unwell and not lucid, or they're doing their own thing and not ready for support, and I have to leave that alone. And what happened in the 2 or 3 weeks between the time that they were ready and the time that I see them out there is unknown.
And I have a question that you probably don't have the answer to at the top of your head. Like I don't expect like a certain percentage, but
good, because I don't have it.
What if you had to guess? What do you think the percentages of people who get addicted to drugs and or alcohol in relation to like childhood trauma?
I don't have a specific number, but I can tell you I'm confident it's high, and over 80%.
Really?
Well, yeah. You've got individuals who struggle with addiction stemming from recreational use, or the developmental stages of recreational use that becomes out of control, and then you've got individuals who are introduced to substances because their lifestyle, that's just the home lifestyle they have. I've had parents introduce substances to kids that then had this feeling of euphoria, which made everything that was shitty disappear that's happened before, and I didn't have to feel that way, and I just kept going and going. So I mean, there is a strong tie of addiction to childhood trauma.
So then the other side of that coin is how many homeless people are either addicted or had childhood trauma, do you suspect?
Do I suspect?
Do you think that's also high? Like that's probably 80% or more?
Not having specific numbers, but in my own experience, having done probably hundreds of comp assessments and met with individuals in the course of my career, a large percent of them have childhood trauma to report to me, along with substance use. And if you think about it, go ahead.
Oh, just another comment from Kelly saying so many of the homeless shelters do digitally track because they're using state and federal funds allocated for homelessness, addiction, and mental illness. Sadly, I've learned that these shelters are a hotspot for vulnerable individuals being targeted and brokered to various rehab facilities and worse.
And I can't speak to that with the facilities that I work with. So I definitely want to put that out there that I work with a small percentage of facilities in Kennebec and Somerset County of Maine, and that's only 2 counties in one state. And if I understand, was it Kara lives out of state, or does she live in Maine?
Kelly lives in Pennsylvania.
Really bad.
Pennsylvania, I believe. Was it Pennsylvania, Jeff?
I thought it was as well.
Yeah, I think it's Pennsylvania. Kelly, you can correct us if we're wrong.
Yes, sorry.
And again, I have to remember that, in my head, it's very acutely the warming center for me lately, because that's where I've been spending my time, and that place is really an emergency shelter. And so if I think about like Mid-Maine Homeless Shelter, there's probably a more intricate Delaware. Okay, Kelly, we all suck. Um, there's probably more intricate ways of keeping track of these individuals. And yes, she is correct. Like for HUD counts and stuff like that, I mean, there's databases that have to be electronic in order to figure out where federal funds are going to go and things like that. In the context of like searching for individuals, though, to see if they have been there, that might be a little harder for individuals that aren't law enforcement, whatnot, to get that information due to privacy.
I'm going to show this, and I showed it to you earlier, and you're not sure how correct these stats are, but this is homeless population change from 2020 to 2023. And this is just what they've gone out and tracked. Like, who knows how many people they're not finding. But I did notice that Maine is like number 2 in the country at 103% growth, and Vermont was 196%. Like, just completely. Why would
like the worst places to end up being?
Like the whole COVID thing, or what? Like COVID gets blamed for so much stuff. Is that the same thing?
Well, definitely. I think we want to consider the bounce back economically from COVID, and definitely not to get political in any fashion, because that's just a waste of time. But if we consider, what people dealt with in terms of mental health crises, medical crises, economic crises, not to mention in those years and in the 2024 and now in 2025, we have natural disasters happening everywhere that are displacing people. And so if these people who are displaced are already on a path of destruction and unsafe lifestyles, it's only going to get worse in not having what little resources you had before. Whereas you've got, and this might contribute to some of these percentages, individuals that are displaced that are just they're staying with family, or they're trying to, housing prices, Kristen Garnett, are a huge thing. But if they're staying with other people and then looking to rebuild their lives, I mean, I know in the state of Maine, that's not considered unhoused by the state of Maine's definition if you're staying with somebody, but there's a lot of factors that go into that.
And this one says 3,455 people experienced homelessness in Maine on January 25th, 2022. So they actually take a moment in time, right? And they go out and they count the number of homeless individuals. So actually the top line.
Yeah, that's a PIT count. Yeah, point in time count.
Point in time count. And then persons in shelters. And then 164 persons unsheltered. I highly doubt that.
And that's what they were able to get on January 25th, which, if we think about it, even 164 unsheltered in the middle of a Maine winter is insane. Yeah.
We're talking blizzards, a foot of snow or more.
Yeah, that's that's any given night is like someone could die without a problem, like very easily in the winter up here.
Brenda says some states will send people by bus to other states to lower their homeless population. I have helped a lady that was a victim of this. It is sad, but it happens. Yeah.
I mean, gross. Again, I can't speak to that, seeing that in my own personal or professional experience, but some individuals too willingly will take buses down to warmer climates, and because they're just so used to a lifestyle.
If it was
like
me,
that.
yeah. If I didn't have like a place to stay, if I was up here in Maine and I didn't have a home, and someone's like, "We can get you on a bus down to Florida," all right, I'll fight some alligators as long as
I have
I'm
a
not
home.
freezing to death.
Take me to Florida.
Well, yeah. Here's the thing, though, is that we once had a friend of ours ask that, like, why can't we just ship them down to a warmer climate? But what is that doing but shifting the issue and shifting the cost down to another state, as well as uprooting an individual who might have even the most minimal support system here. Now we're going to put them in a state where they're not familiar with the environment. They're not familiar with anybody there. They don't know they've got Maine Care and EBT and all that stuff here that they understand, but they got to transfer it down there with someone they don't know. Or what about an individual who's getting medicated assisted treatment? Now they've got no provider. Suboxone can't be filled from Maine. Now I'm in Florida. I don't know what to do. You sleep on the street, you meet someone who's like, man, you look like you could use a hit. Suddenly I'm in Florida for 3 years because I came down here to be warm, So to me, I have issues with that solution, because that's just passing the buck. And also potentially creating more opportunity for trauma and exploitation.
And I mean, and that could, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more too. But the reason why maybe some people do go missing, that people are having a hard time finding because they've just maybe gone to a different area because it was convenient. You know, maybe someone said, "Hey, like I've got a friend who lives over here, like in this state. He's let me come. You can come too." You know, there's a lot of ways that someone can end up in like a missing scenario,
and think
especially
about
if
how
there's like
that
an addiction
could go,
problem.
think about how that could go. You know, if I say, and which is common, right? Individuals that are coming from backgrounds where they have trauma, they weren't taught good social skills, or they don't have good social skills. Any person that shows them kindness is going to be someone that they attach to, right? So if I just meet you and you say, yeah, no, I got a friend, Travis, he's going to let me stay with him, but you don't really know Travis, or you know Travis is a, you know, not a good person, but is giving you a place to live, and you don't tell me, and I go with you thinking that I trust Jeff. I just met Jeff. He must, you know, he'll keep me. Nope. Suddenly I'm now a victim of something because you didn't know, Jeff, that Travis was going to mess with me, and I'm here.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yep.
Big messes that begin in that way.
I thought this was interesting too. 49% of homeless individuals report being victims of violence. So basically 1 out of every 2 homeless people have some sort of violence, right? In the general population, that's 2% are victims of violence.
Right.
I don't know what they're considering violence, but
I mean, and you can't be surprised. Not that it's a good thing, but you can't be surprised because there's a lot of people that don't see people who are homeless as like another human being. You know, some people are just terrible people, and they'll take the opportunity to do harm against someone if they think that, oh, well, you know, they're not going to report it, they're not going to call the cops on me, I can just do this and get away with it. And it's unfortunate.
Well, and I think another thing to consider too when it comes to that, Jeff, is that it's violence between individuals who are unhoused. You know, when there's escalations about resources, or people are stealing from each other or tearing each other's tents, turning on each other, you know, individuals have to pack up all of their belongings and carry everything with them, because even if the most like remote, weird, secretive spot, if it's found at times, can be ransacked, and, you know, things that are helping them survive are stolen. And if they know who did it, or there's suspicion of who did it, and then there's retaliation, I mean, there's a lot of, you know, tension and conflict within the unhoused community because these individuals can't resolve conflict and cause conflict.
I mean, their whole like tension is inherently high in like the way that they live anyways, right? Because everything is like, you know, everything is so desperate.
Yes. This time of year is the time of year that we see the most vulnerability out of our unhoused community, in terms of they've reached their breaking point, and we are watching people in tears because they are constantly in hypervigilant state, waiting for the next element to disrupt their safety, the next person to disrupt their serenity, or the next issue to become a problem for them to solve. And there's no rest for them. They're tired. We've had people lugging in two big bags, and then they empty them out, and then they get their water jugs that they use they fill up their water jugs because they're staying somewhere with no running water. They have shelter from the elements, but no heat and running water. And that's tiring. If you think of how much goes into surviving, basically having clean water that you have to ration, and people want to see you be productive in society. When do you have time between figuring out how to clean yourself, feed yourself, keep yourself safe, to think about a bigger contribution to society and making money? Mm-hmm. And by no means does that take away a standard of trying to pursue that, but it's very distressful for an individual to feel society's pressure on them to not be homeless when they are doing everything they can with minimal resources to just survive being homeless.
Just get by, right?
You know,
Kelly Kelly has a statement here. She says, the statement that my brother made less than a month before he disappeared will forever haunt me, and ties into the show topic. People like him, without families that will look for them, are being targeted. Yeah, that's what Bobby had said a month before he went missing, that people are going missing in the homeless community because they're being targeted and most likely killed for whatever they had.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, we talked about that earlier, how, the different factors that increase vulnerability, not having a phone to be contacted, not having a support system, or, places that you frequent, so that, someone who knows your face or seen you, that it's huge that we in the community are connecting with each other. And I thank God for Angles, and I thank God for the opportunity to work with the individuals at Bread of Life and Warming Center and the Link Club and the Teen Center, and anybody else that I haven't mentioned. Options, I love you. Like, these are people that have exponentially increased my ability to touch base with these individuals, because I can say, have you seen them? I haven't, but I'll let you know when I do. And now I've got individuals, God love them, seriously, that know me and know that I'm looking for people, and will tell their unhoused friends, Dannielle's looking for you. You got to get to the Link Club and call her. Like, people want to help each other. They just need the hope and a pathway there, Paths. I gotta call out Paths at KBH. I love them too.
Kelly also said, very true. I remember hearing stories of tents being burned down, belongings stolen, and people that would rather sleep on the cold sidewalk than sleep in the woods because of these attacks.
It's terrorizing. There are individuals, again, we're talking a spectrum of individuals that are out there that, range from people who are, mentally ill, untreated, and unable to care for themselves and move past that, to people that are liking being unhoused and dealing with the elements, more so in the summer months than the winter months, for sure, but they feel freer that way. We've had several clients that have preferred that, and this is how we function with them. Then you've got individuals that are just plain evil and have lost their sense of humanity, and do horrible things.
Oh, I thought this was crazy too. Homelessness is deadly. So the average lifespan of a homeless person is like 50 years, and any other American is 77. I thought that was like eye-opening.
It is. When you don't have access to healthcare on a regular basis, or you don't have money to purchase something as simple as cold medicine, when you get a respiratory infection, that stuff's going to linger. I met an individual once who thought he was doing right by himself, taking peppermint oil for his belly, and showed me the jar he was using. And immediately I was like, you got to stop taking that. It's definitely a diffuser oil, not ingestible. It says it, but here this person is thinking that they're trying to take care of their bodies in any way they know how, and are actually hurting themselves more,
Crazy.
So when you're trying to have that, and it's interesting, I'll be doing a training at Angles tomorrow around disparities in our rural communities and stuff like that put people in positions to have to manage their health care without professionals because they can't afford it. And a lot of them aren't doing it properly. So, it's sad. And so it doesn't surprise me that, especially when you're so down and out, things like cigarettes and substances are going to be coping mechanisms which ultimately destroy your body.
Kristen has a question here for you. With strained resources from the state and just natural stigma around homelessness, what's the best suggestion for those not empathetic or experienced with the country's growing homeless problems so they are seen more?
My biggest advice is that get connected to a place that you are comfortable with that is helping with this crisis, whether that be volunteering at your church, whether that be, donating to Salvation Army, donating to specifics in the Red Cross. We've got bridging in Augusta, I can't speak to other areas, but places like clothing closets and food pantries. Volunteer your time, where you're exposed to these individuals, and not all of them are going to be pleasant. I mean, they've got personalities too, and they have bad days too. But there are individuals that I wouldn't change a thing in the world having met them. And I make sure that they know every time I talk to them that they teach me just as much as I've taught them or done for them, just being who they are and, you know, letting me support them, which takes humbleness, you know. Oh boy, I got a call on my work phone. I don't know what that is, but I won't answer it because I most likely have HR watching me. So.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. So getting connected to resources that you're comfortable with. I'm someone that dives right into just being with the people. But if that's something that's not comfortable for you, then you know, making sure that you're donating to things that you believe in and trust. You know, showing kindness to the people that you see, and that doesn't mean going up to them and talking to them or giving them food, but maybe not scowling at them, maybe not, you know, and we can't fix the individuals who don't have empathy. What we can do is just outshine them with empathy and love that we have.
And Allison White says humbleness and kindness.
Mm-hmm. We're all one tragedy away from homelessness.
So with the unhoused population, you had touched on it a little bit earlier, but does that not lead to the potential for people to be victims of trafficking of some sort, either for labor or for sexual trafficking? Is that anything that you have an experience with as far as coming across that type of situation? Or
our unhoused community have had situations of exploitation that range from cheap labor to sex exploitation, drug trafficking, squatting. Like, you know, it's interesting. Individuals that are unhoused, but no individuals that are housed, their stuff usually bleeds into their friends who are housed, who, you know, want to give them a place to stay, and then they get their house taken over by individuals dealing drugs, and then it becomes, you know, a den for them, and they're held hostage in their own house. You know,
there's actually a case of that right now in Maine. Jeremy Hill has some squatters come into his home, kind of take over the home. Next, you know, Jeremy's found in the woods dead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And no one's been charged in that, but that's the kind of scenario that I think someone should be.
Yeah, but they're absolutely in situations that put them at risk of running into individuals or circumstances that lead them into harm, exploitation, or death, for sure.
And if you want to put that back up there, Travis, the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So I pulled up their site earlier just because I wanted to go over. And I'm gonna this may take a little bit. I'm gonna read through sort of stuff on their page, and this is like recognizing the signs for trafficking. So sorry if this is a little bit dry. Like I said, I'm going to read this directly from their website, but it says recognizing the signs. As the U.S. anti-trafficking movement has grown in our understanding of this diverse and complex crime, we are learning more about how specific people such as medical professionals, teachers, truck drivers, and restaurant personnel, in addition to friends and family members, can help identify and report possible trafficking. Everyone can help by learning the types of trafficking and paying attention to the people around us. It says, who's the most vulnerable? Anyone can experience trafficking in any community, just as anyone can be the victim of any kind of crime. So let's go down here a little bit more. People may be vulnerable to trafficking if they have an unstable living condition, have previously experienced other forms of violence such as sexual abuse or domestic violence, have run away or involved in the juvenile justice or child welfare system, are undocumented immigrants, are facing poverty or economic need, have a caregiver or family member who has a substance issue, or are addicted to drugs or alcohol. It says, who are the traffickers? And it says there's no evidence that traffickers are more likely to be of any particular race, nationality, gender, or sexual orientation. They may be family members, romantic partners, acquaintances, or strangers. Now, how traffickers lure people in. Now, here's a few situations that might raise concerns. A would-be employer refuses to give workers a signed contract or asks them to sign a contract in a language they can't read. A would-be employer collects fees from a potential worker for the opportunity to work in a particular job. A friend, family member, coworker, or student is newly showered with gifts or money or otherwise becomes involved in an overwhelming, fast-moving, and asymmetric e.g. large difference in age or financial status, romantic relationship. A friend, family member, or student is a frequent runaway and may be staying with someone who is not their partner or guardian. A family member, friend, coworker, or student is developing a relationship that seems too close with someone they know is solely on social media, so like catfishing. A family member, friend, or student lives with a parent or guardian that shows signs of abuse. They're offered a job opportunity that seems too good to be true. If they're recruited for an opportunity that requires them to move far away, but their recruiter or prospective employer avoids answering their questions or is reluctant to providing detailed information about the job. Now, there's more stuff on here about like labor trafficking. Someone may be experiencing labor trafficking or exploitation if they feel pressured by their employer to stay on the job or situation and they want to leave, owe money to an employer or recruiter, or not being paid what they're promised or owed. They don't have control of their passport or their other identity documents. They're living and working in isolated conditions, largely cut off from an interaction with others or support systems. They appear to be monitored by another person when talking or interacting with others. They're being threatened by their boss with deportation or harm. They're working in dangerous conditions without proper safety gear, training, adequate breaks, or other protections. They're living in dangerous, overcrowded, or inhumane conditions provided by an employer. Now, the next thing is recognizing sex trafficking. So sex trafficking occurs when individuals are made to perform commercial sex through the use of fraud, force, coercion. Any child under 18 who's involved in commercial sex is legally a victim of trafficking, regardless of whether there's a third party involved. This says someone may be experiencing sex trafficking if they want to stop participating in commercial sex but feel scared or unable to leave the situation, and that's pretty obvious. They disclose that they were reluctant to engage in commercial sex, but that is someone pressured them into it. They live where they work or are transported by guards between homes and workplace. There are children who live or are dependent on a family member with a substance use problem or who is abusive. Obviously, if they have a pimp or a manager. They work in an industry where it may be common to be pressured into performing sex acts or for money, such as strip clubs, illicit cantina, a go-go bar, or illicit massage business. When they have a controlling parent, guardian, romantic partner, or a sponsor will not allow them to meet or speak with anyone alone, or who monitors their movements, spending, or communications. That last one just sounds a little like.
Oh,
anyways, that was
there was some feedback on Dannielle's microphone, so I had to mute her for a second. I apologize, Danielle.
I'm sorry.
No, it's because we have headphones on and you didn't, so it's like echoey. So Amber says people hear, and she means HEAR. She corrects herself later on. People hear trafficking, they think like selling them far away. People don't understand the simple fact of exploiting them sexually. Yeah.
Well, and can we also like expand what we think about when it comes to trafficking, that monetary compensation isn't always like selling people or making money off them. This can be sex for a place to live, sex for food, sex for resources, sex for drugs. That is a form of exploiting a human being that snowballs into what we're thinking of in the grander scheme of like organized movement of human beings.
Kelly says they're living right next door to you in every type of neighborhood. They visit your local banks. They don't hide their victims, always in every circumstance, and will boldly bring them into banks to open accounts and use them for to launder money.
Absolutely. Seen it myself and had to report.
And Kelly is saying, I work for a bank and a mall, so we're always on high alert for the signs.
Good, Kelly. Awesome. And that's the kind of stuff that I think about is so necessary in our society, is awareness and vigilance to those things that, bankers might not seem like big players in a person's life, but could really save a person who comes in with an individual who's not familiar to that banker. You know, I know this person, I don't know that person, what's going on, this isn't like that person. And they have that power to deny any sort of cash flow or cash change, which can lead to saving that individual from being exploited.
Yeah, and Kara says, and I guess talking about what Jeff had spoke about, wow, that last part there caught my attention about parents. And I think she's talking about a certain case up in northern Maine involving a 14-year-old.
And I just had a couple, like, this is just some stuff that I'd put down. I probably could have looked up better tips, but like for anyone who thinks that they have a family member, and this isn't necessarily, this is good advice for if you have anyone that you care about, right? This is stuff that most of us are probably going to know anyways, but especially if you have a family member that you're concerned about, or you think is in a situation where they could potentially like go missing or be in a very vulnerable state. Just some things like to have handy in case, God forbid, like they do go missing, or you know, if something happens, like make sure you have like some sort of like up-to-date photos of them, because that happens quite often where, you know, people won't have like they'll try to say, well, this is what I kind of remember they looked like, or they'll have a photo of them from like 10 years ago, and just something that would be handy there. Also, knowing the people that they spend time with, even if it's a family member that's in a different state, right? If they have a substance problem, they're living out of state. You know, we run into that quite a bit. You know, try to see if you can get like a contact of someone that they spend time with, or know the location the locations that they spend time at. You know, places that they might be hanging out. If you do get the opportunity to talk to them, you know, just try to stay as connected as possible. You know, try to constantly check in, and also ask about any like medical conditions that they're willing to disclose to you, if like they're having any sort of medical if they have any medical history stuff that maybe you weren't aware of before. It's mostly just checking with them. Not only is that like going to be useful if, God, like I said, God forbid something were to happen, but you know, it's also going to raise their spirits to know that someone cares about them as well, right?
Yeah. Yep. Amber says, I love what you guys do. I hope to see your channel and podcast gain a lot more momentum. So do we. It's been kind of slow for us. I mean, we've been doing it for 5 years now, I think. So she does have a suggestion. So we do take suggestions, just not live. No, I'm just kidding. She says, in your title or description, do some hashtags like missing, locate, etc., because it brings your channel. Yeah, I typically try to do that. Today was kind of last minute thing.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you. I will make sure we do that in the future.
Hear that, guys? I'm last minute.
No. Never. Allison was talking about situation right now where I'm scared to death. I'm going to have to move out of my home. Bad neighbors who aren't kind. Allison, I'm so sorry. If you want to post on here where you live, maybe someone watching has some housing available for you.
Well, also check your local community advocacy programs that are out there. Call your town office for support. Like, they can give you direction to United Way or Salvation Army. The other thing too is maybe if you're having to move because you don't like your neighbors, then your landlord or whoever's in charge of your place is not doing their job to keep the peace in their facility. If it's your home, then I would get police involved.
Yeah.
Machias.
Ugh. That's a hard one. Rural Maine is hard. That's hard.
Yeah.
You know, the resources are very sparse, and as you guys have revealed before, they're not necessarily operating at their best.
Good tip here from Kelly. It helps when reporting them missing, giving the police somewhere to check that will help establish a pattern of life.
And I was going to say that it's so important, if you do have that familiarity with where they frequent, where they were last seen, what conditions they were dealing with. It gives investigators, a lot more of a pathway to figure out that puzzle. it's hard because I'm getting to know the local law enforcement, probation officers, city officers in, Skowhegan and the Augusta area who are genuine and really do work hard to try and help individuals put the pieces together for themselves. And they want to help, but it's very difficult when someone, doesn't have a phone, doesn't have a support system. No one at any place can say they've seen him or haven't seen him or are familiar with him, because they've become ghosts. And when you have to think about triaging, the pathways you can't get to versus the pathways you can get to, it ends up hurting some families that don't feel their loved ones being searched for. But there's no way to search for them,
So Dannielle, I know you spend quite a bit of time like in different homeless encampments trying to help individuals. Are you seeing a lot of youth, like maybe not even minors, but young adults and minors, if you see minors?
So not in large numbers, thank God. But yes, absolutely. There are minors that are either, with their parents in an unhoused situation, or fragilely housed. That's definitely, in my opinion, should be included in how we try to fight off these vulnerabilities in people as fragilely housed. As I was telling you earlier, people that have shelter but don't have heat or running water are just as good as being out in the elements, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But if they're with their parents, there's trauma bonds that keep them in cycles with their parents versus getting help, because legally, people that are 14 to 18 now have more rights to kind of take on some stuff for themselves if they want to, but it's a matter of having connections and resources and knowledge that that's the case. But yeah, I remember one day hiking out probably a good half a mile into the woods and finding a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old that were living out there.
Wow. Amber, thank you. She donated $5. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Bring awareness to a lot of amazing topics. Thank you.
I think that's our first super chat. So thank you very much, Amber.
Allison says, thank you for the
Very
advice.
much.
I really appreciate it. So good job, Dannielle.
Yeah. And also I would look into, agencies for support, like case management support, because they'll be able to navigate some of the more systemic pathways in government, maybe, or local government at least, to get some support for you.
That's awesome. Thank you. Kelly says, there are so many genuinely care and do it all for the right reasons. I will forever be grateful for the detective, a state away, that devoted time and access to search for a man that never made it back to that state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have tendency to kind of beat up on the police departments and say they're not doing the jobs, but there's so many good officers out there. There's so many good people that want to try to help.
So many that are willing to, step out of the law enforcement role and recognize the need for mental health, approaches to individuals who are unwell. I know we have, covered, or you guys, I shouldn't say you guys have covered a lot of cases where police officers have presented with questionable professionalism, and it's just not always the case. And I do think it's important to lift our officers up, because they are a quintessential part of keeping our communities safe. And the departments, Waterville PD, Augusta PD, that I work with, want to be involved in their community. We've got liaisons that are out there on foot with our unhoused, that are trying to keep them, healthy and safe and away from illegal activity, because they care. And I honestly don't know how I've done my job before without knowing and having connections to the police department.
And Brenda Lee is saying the community care in Bangor is another resource for those who need help. We even have a youth shelter. I assume then that Brenda Lee works with them. Yeah, we have a youth shelter and transitional housing. So 1-888-236-2273. And Allison is saying that Crisis is going to help her. Also, I did see here from Amber saying that she works in behavioral health as well. That's fantastic.
Nice to meet you, Amber.
Which is, there are a lot of young folks where I work, and I just try to mentor them the best way I can.
Yeah. And I'm not saying there isn't youth out there. I'm saying just the context in which I've been able to interact has been intermittent because, well, I wear many hats and fluid in what I do for the people I serve and the company I work for. So for a time, I was working with adolescents and providing treatment to them, which then put me into the teen center and interacting with the schools. And, it just was not for me to stay in. And now I'm working in outreach. And so it's absolutely, the people that are in those positions. We've got New Beginnings out this way that work with youth in transitional housing. And so it's definitely a problem, but it's not one I personally interact with.
And Amber says, I work at transitional centers, so I see all ages.
Whereabouts? The outreach in me.
She's saying every position is important.
Man, it is.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, a lot of times you see on these missing pages, and it's because someone's homeless or someone's addicted and don't always stay.
Oh, Amber, that doesn't help me.
Just right down the road. Here we are in Maine, and she's in Arizona.
But
I hope the
still,
weather's nice
I
over
can only imagine what she's facing out in Arizona if we think about,
we have a much smaller population. The numbers out there.
We're such a different type of culture too,
But I'm super proud of what you do, and hopefully, I've said that before, but I know you do a lot for the community, and you do a lot for the homeless population. You do a lot for people with substances abuses and stuff. I am proud of you and what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm very proud of you guys for what you're doing. To me, this is a platform to be able to have a conversation and allow people to feel comfortable discussing topics that are uncomfortable, and hopefully finding in themselves the empathy and compassion to want to do something, and understanding that helplessness is a real thing. People don't know what to do to contribute to this issue. It's so much bigger than just one person. If that's anything I've learned in the last year and a half, this is big, and it takes a lot of moving parts to support, and not all those moving parts agree all the time. So you got to get over conflict or disagreement about how money is spent, where it's allocated, what's happening in the community that makes people uncomfortable or comfortable. You've got issues like harm reduction, low barrier shelters that not everyone in the community is comfortable with. And so that creates a lot of inertia to getting things solved, because you have to go through processes of planning board and budget hearings and community being comfortable with having a shelter in an area that's local to businesses or whatnot. Because at the end of the day, this issue is impacting individuals who are housed, who are trying to make a living, who are working, right? And their communities are becoming uncomfortable, and everybody deserves to feel comfortable. And so there has to be some common ground that's found where we embrace the humanity of our unhoused individuals or fragilely housed, but also don't silence the voices of individuals who are living their lives and actively trying to just have healthy, experiences in their community.
Yeah. So if I'm that guy sitting at a stoplight and someone's holding up a sign, I mean, what should I, because I've heard this both ways, right? I hear some people say, well, don't give them any money because they can just go spend it on something else. And like, well, I know what you do, but
what do I do?
You're a very giving person sometimes.
Here's a couple things. Go to your local shelters or behavioral health offices and ask for cards and pamphlets. And yeah, you might get yelled at handing a card or a pamphlet out to somebody, but you're giving them a pathway. I
That's a good
have
idea.
asked an individual, are you hungry, if they're near a restaurant, and I'll go get them a burger or I'll go get them a sandwich, because at the very least they have a full belly, right? Who knows when the last time they had a hot meal is. Not that Burger King is a hot meal, but that's what's there. You can give them hand warmers, mittens, hats, things that help to reduce the distress of living in the elements. Again, I come across this stuff too, and I'll give cards or I'll give food, but sometimes I do just allow myself to say I'm doing my part in other ways. And today I'm not that person. And that is hard to do. It is hard to do, but I also have to say to myself, okay, I know that this is going to take 20 minutes to an hour to take care of, and I've got my child with me, and I don't have the ability to do it today. But does this give me a thought about how I could be more prepared next time with something to give this individual, or, provide donations to resources that are going to end up putting a blanket in this person's hand. Of course,
and you've said that before, like we'll see somebody and you're like, oh, I got to go there tomorrow and check in on them, reach out to them. So,
but I hope that this is like giving some people a bit of insight into, what's going on in the world around them, and maybe a bit of advice, things to look out for. Ultimately, we want people to try and reach out to each other if they're in trouble. Like that's the only way that we're going to help each other, right? Is having some compassion.
And and how you can have compassion, like I said, is getting involved. I know I've been trying to drag my butt out to the Saturday morning breakfast at South Parish. 7:00 is early, but those girls, Betty and Rusty, they're amazing. They're out there. Sue Gagney is out there all the time, serving breakfast and lunches to these individuals. And that creates a sense of community and connection, which then builds trust and then helps make these individuals more accessible to providers or resources, because they have that support system and volunteers. And I have to put out there, you're not going to have a pretty experience every time. I myself just 2 days ago got reamed out by an unhoused individual because I was taking too long to talk to him. And that didn't feel good, getting yelled at in front of a bunch of people, but it is what it is. It's going to be part of it.
And that's one thing that I don't like about your job, is going into these communities, and it's not like you're packing a pistol on your hip or anything. Do you feel safe when you go in to talk to the unhoused?
I do. And if I go places where I'm not going to feel safe, and it's usually because it's unfamiliar, I do bring someone with me. There is protocol and training and groups that go out together. There are places that I have been told by individuals who are unhoused, don't enter into that area, because they're territorial. They will not recognize you. They will not like you. And so again, I can say I have wonderful people that I'm serving that are unhoused, and it's amazing how much I'm talking to people just today, just stopping in, like 6 or 7 people I recognize just walking down the street, or hanging out under the trestle or whatnot, so I'm feeling more and more comfortable. And I have colleagues that are doing probably more in the community as far as picking up needles, walking through encampments, walking the rail trail, that make me feel safe too, because we all kind of are a little sub community.
I want to get to a couple of the comments here. Yeah, Brenda saying you can have small blankets on hand to give them in the winter. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Kelly's saying, for sure, take care of your community. Don't turn your head when you see someone in need. And this is actually my boss. Hi, Faith. Love you. It is still someone on the side of the road begging to me. It doesn't matter why they're there, right? It's still a person, no matter what.
Well, and absolutely, always take that attitude. It's still a human being that is sacrificing dignity to sit and beg in the elements of heat or cold, right? And I do know that there are individuals that take advantage of that are housed, have an income, could have access to support to thrive in their lives, but due to mental illness, addiction, or trauma that's stunted development and skills building, they don't know any better. And so and then there are ones that do make it up and are not being honest, but it's not our job to figure out what they're doing with their lives. It's our job to be in that moment human and caring. And if all you can do is not scowl at the person or run your mouth, after the fact, that puts negativity out there in the world to others about this community, then so be it. That's what your part is. To just
Faith says exactly. Nancy Drew. I don't know if this is the Nancy Drew, because if it is, we'll have her on the podcast.
Very cool.
I try to volunteer at the Code Purple shelters every other weekend. Nice. But I'm always sending blankets and jackets. I love talking to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
give the life experiences that they have that they can share with you.
And you've probably grown in your heart, Nancy, in ways that you didn't expect, interacting with individuals that, are actually endearing. I got one person that he just makes my heart burst because he's a goofball, but he's a goofball. But I'm so glad I met him. I'm so glad that he trusts me to tell me bits of his life and who he was as a man before he was in this situation, which is so frustrating for him because people, whether it's because of lack of resources, lack of stamina, right, in dealing with this huge problem, or just being an asshole, he's not treated like a person. And so when someone sits and listens to a story about his childhood or about something he did when he was a working man, it's nice. That's the human side. So, but that's my spiel.
I just heard Jeff's stomach, his supper sitting next to him. So we're going to wrap it up.
But thank you guys, everyone, for Nancy Drew.
The biggest hearts and so many stories. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks everyone for tuning in for this, and again we said hopefully you guys could get something from this, and it's nice to hear so many generous stories from the people watching, and thank you very much, Dannielle, for being here, and thank you for everything that you do.
Of course, I'm so happy to do it. I'm very blessed to be in this position. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. You all set?
Yeah.
Bye,
okay. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
In.
The search for 5-year-old Taylor Williams led investigators to Alabama this week.
So we have some breaking news from Florida. An arrest has been made in connection.
After years of agony, a glimmer of hope for the family.
Investigators spent hours searching through this house off Pennsylvania Avenue.
What could be a major development in the search for missing Alabama teenager.
Tonight, a stunning twist in the search for Taylor.
Somebody out there knows something.
They want to lay him to rest their way, not by somebody else's way.